Hello, all you happy sellers, and welcome to episode 11 of the SDR DiscoCall podcast. I'm your host, Neil Buyan. Today's guest is Maxmillian Licht, a US SDR who transitioned from real estate into SaaS sales and all the techniques and strategies he learned to be a top SDR whilst working at Zuora. And we're also going to learn what happened to Max when he didn't get his AE promotion and his current game plan to go get that promotion. So how does the SDR DiscoCall podcast work? Well, it's actually a discovery call, hence the name. And every Tuesday at 8 a.m, we're going to have a brand new SDR for 30 minutes and an agenda of introductions, their SDR story, and 3 key takeaways that they've learned to share with other SDRs. So with that in mind, let's begin. So guys, welcome to today's episode. I've got a very good guest on the show today. We've got Maxmillian Licht. Maxmillian is somebody I connected through LinkedIn, and we actually did work at the same company at some point in time, but at different times, and had a really great chat with him. He's super energized and pumped, and I really love his mentality when it comes to sales and as an SDR. So rather than me go on about Max, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Neil. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on.
Thank you, dude, and welcome to the show. So, Max, for the SDRs that can't see you, but they can hear you, it would be great just to give us a quick introduction of who is Max, what you're currently doing, and where do you work?
Yeah, of course, Neil. So like you said, my name is Maxmillian Licht. I am currently an SDR. I've been an SDR for about 2 years. I'm 23 years old, graduated school in 2018. So pretty quickly after my graduation, I did go into tech sales and into the SDR role. I'm from Martinez, California, which is a pretty small town, about 45 minutes from San Francisco. So as a lot of you can imagine, I'm sure, kind of grew up with a backdrop of tech in my life and just in kind of the culture around where I come from. Went to school at UCSB and was in real estate for a while there before making the jump into tech. And I will tell you that's a decision I will never regret. And it's been a great thing for me, both in a lot of ways, just in every way. So yeah, always excited to talk about this role.
I love it. Thank you so much, dude. And as you mentioned, like you made the jump in from real estate and then you came into tech sales, and you've had a really good career from what I've seen on LinkedIn. For the guys out there that don't know what you do in terms of the company, kind of where do you work today, and what do these guys do, and how do you help them?
Yeah, so as of now, I'm an SDR at a company called Productive. We are about a 60-person startup that was founded in 2018. So a young company. We've been selling for about 4 quarters now, which makes it interesting. When you come in at different stages of a company, you're always taking on different tasks and seeing different things in the marketplace. What Productive is a software asset management platform. So we essentially help companies optimize the way they're using and spending their software as a service technologies. So I always say to people, it is like the most San Francisco company ever, because we're literally SaaS for your SaaS. If you want to see how to SaaS in a sentence, just come sell a product like this.
I love it. SaaS for your SaaS. That's super cool, dude. And so like we were speaking a few weeks ago, and we were talking about your journey before you jumped into like tech sales. And I read where you had, like you said, experience of real estate, you'd done some customer service, you joined the big Z at Zuora, and then you came to Productive. What was that whole story of kind of like when you left university?
Yeah, of course. So I think first off, something that's important to note, and I think this is something that's true of a lot of salespeople. I drink the Kool-Aid very easily. And I drank the Kool-Aid for real estate sales in college, actually through my aunt, who was a great mentor of mine, was someone who introduced me to real estate. So I was very involved and very inspired by Santa Barbara real estate when I was in college. That's something I spent a lot of time doing, and that I thought would be my career, for 30 years after being a realtor in Santa Barbara. But pretty quickly after graduating, I realized that I needed a bigger scene, a bigger stage, and I wanted to be somewhere where instead of making a sale based upon, personality and based upon connections in the community, I wanted to be selling something based upon, the tenets and the aspects of a product that actually is able to differentiate itself in the marketplace. And that's a conclusion that I came to over kind of a long period of time, but it was very clear that I needed to leave real estate. And to me, that was coming up to San Francisco, and that was going into software sales. And like you said, the first place that kind of jumped out to me, and quite honestly, Zuora was like the first application I sent out to be an SDR, and thank God it was, because I had a great experience there. But They swept me right through the interview process. I didn't tell the agent I was working with. I was an agent, also assisting an agent. He was kind of the leader of our team. And I sort of did the interview process for Zuora like secretly and took a day off to be sick to fly up to San Francisco, or actually drive up to San Francisco and interview for Zuora. But essentially it was something I felt, I needed to be in sales still, but needed to be in something where I had the support of a company and was selling something more technical. And I think that was a great decision.
Wow, that's super sleuth, cool groundwork that you've done there. So explain it to me, like break it down me a bit, like you're saying you was an agent, like helping an agent, like what was that all about? How was that working, dude?
Yeah, so it's a pretty common way to get into real estate is to get your real estate license and to be able to independently sell real estate, but then also to do transaction coordination and marketing coordination for a more established agent. So I was trying to generate my own business. I had the capability to close deals as a real estate agent, which I did sell a couple condos in my time down there in Santa Barbara. But most of the work I did was assisting a top producing real estate agent, doing all of their paperwork, kind of what's called transaction coordination, which is doing the escrow paperwork, the listing paperwork, ensuring all that is completed on time. And then the marketing coordination, which is running the website, working with the internal marketing team that we had at Village Properties, which was the agency that we worked for. So really doing a lot of the back end work that was great experience for what I'll be doing, what I've been doing as an SDR and what I will be doing as an account executive. So I encourage anyone real estate's often something where it's easy to kind of pick up some hours or assist people while you're in school or while you're working on other career paths. I definitely encourage anyone to get their license and kind of check out that world because it's invaluable experience.
100%, my man. And I love it, like where you say you gained a lot of experience of running your own business, touching different elements, which assists you, like you say, as an SDR and as a future account executive. And it's really cool because I'm doing it the other way around, where I've been an SDR and I'm like exploring the world of real estate. And I can definitely understand it's something good to get into in terms of long-term investments. And I'm still a schoolboy in the world of real estate. So I may be coming to you, Max, to learn a couple of tips. But as you mentioned, like you were going through there, you was an agent, you was helping out with that business, and then you came across the big Z and Zuora. So for me, when I first came across Zuora, I didn't really understand what SaaS or software as a service meant. I didn't really understand startups. I knew Silicon Valley is where it's at because companies like Apple, etc., that's where they were founded. Like when you bumped into Zuora, kind of what were your first impressions and how did you come to the conclusion that's the place you want to go?
Yeah, I'm not going to give myself too much credit for making some high level decision between Zuora and a bunch of other software as a service companies I could have went to. Like I said, it was kind of the first one I applied to, and they just did a really good job with the recruiting process, which I think underscores with young SDRs and young people looking into a field. It's really important as a company to have a robust recruiting process and something that kind of sweeps people through the process, because that experience really does, as a company, allow you to bring people in. But I think, like I said, I drink the Kool-Aid pretty easily, and I had really not as much of an idea of what SaaS was at that point either. Not as much of an idea about the software industry in general. I did have a lot of friends who were SDRs and account executives in different roles in tech. So I had people I could talk to about it that gave me a lot of background information. But I will say, a lot of tech companies, you kind of look at the value proposition, you look at what they're saying on their website, and it sounds generic. It makes some sense. You can't really buy into it. Zuora's value proposition and what they were saying, and it just made a ton of sense even to a layman. And I think that's something that shows the best technology companies is that they latch on to a shift in the marketplace that is real, that the common person can understand, and then they articulate that well. And Zuora did that really well, and I believed in what they were saying, and that combined with a robust recruiting process and seeing the backgrounds of the people that I was speaking to in this recruiting process, it really just made it something that it's a good recruiting process, and you want to be there when you want that offer so bad, and you're like trying to close the sales on the last call, and that's exactly how I felt. So yeah, really a combination of factors, but it all just made sense at the time.
Solid, man, solid. And I think you raise a really good point there, right? There could be a lot of listeners in who are thinking about joining their first startup and they're looking at the website. When I used to be an SDR manager, that was one of the questions that I asked in the interview. I said, "Oh, have you had a look at the website? And what's your conclusion of what we do?" And this was really good for marketing as well, because to your point, for somebody that's not familiar with the world, they can give a fresh pair of eyes to say, I don't get it or I get it. And I'm really happy to see that you chose Zuora, like the whole subscription economy is something I was pitching many years ago. But you also mentioned a really interesting point, Max, where you had a lot of friends who are in tech and SaaS sales, etc. So you could always go to people to ask advice. And during my time, I've had a lot of people that have maybe come from a recruitment background or perhaps worked in customer service or customer facing roles. And they also speak to their friends that are in the SaaS jobs where they're saying, hey, you need to get out that career. You need to come work for tech. You need to work for a startup. What were the type of questions that you were asking your friends to kind of, get an idea and flavor of if this is a career for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's not a simple question. And it's easy to look back at it now and think I had this more developed line of questioning that I probably didn't have at the time. But really for me, when I'm going into a conversation, I'm going into an interview, I'm going potentially into a new industry. I think I want to know more about it than is even maybe prudent. And I want to know things that maybe aren't even relevant to my role. So I was talking to a lot of buddies I had who are engineers, software engineers who are architects. Like I have buddies in that kind of realm as well. Asking them a lot of the deeper things about like, what is software as a service? What's the differentiation? Like, how has this changed for you in your time? So I really like to ask the technical questions to the people who are more in the engineering roles and the architecture roles and really just get their kind of concept on how to even use the language around technology. Because I think, especially in a sales role, one of the biggest things is in that interview process too, is having the right vernacular and verbiage. And I think, the technical people are a great place to go for that. But then when it came to, a majority of my friends are definitely, especially at that point, we're in SDR and account executive roles. And I just asked them, what is the sales process? What is pipeline? Like, what are you doing? Like, are you cold calling? Like, I had no idea even what the sales role was. And even just by brief conversations with my friends who were already in these roles, it just made a lot more sense to me and allowed me to feel more comfortable about making the jump and allowed me to feel more comfortable about the concept of going into an entry-level role and having the opportunity to actually advance in one of these companies. And I think that's something that's very encouraging about tech in general. It's, for one, it values talent, and for two, it's always changing and always expanding, and companies are always growing. And that's something that's going to give you opportunity. And being able to hear that from my friends who had already been promoted in tech roles and such was very encouraging and helped me and helped make that decision a lot easier for me.
And I think you made the right decision, my man. And you've raised some really interesting points there. So, like you said, getting the vernacular, getting the verbiage, trying to understand the words, the millions of acronyms that you find in SaaS like API, CRM, etc. And I remember when I went into my onboarding for Zuora, I was like, I have no experience in tech. I don't know what any of these guys are talking about. I don't understand quarters, pipeline, etc. And I think that ability to ask what I saw as veterans that had been doing SaaS for 10 years, that were like leaders of Zuora, just said, hey, there was a guy called Richard Terry Lloyd, RTL. I said, RTL, what the hell does that mean? And he'd look at me like, dude, you don't know? And he said, okay, well, this is what it means. And he would always explain it to me. But also, I think another point that you raised where you've got friends that work in engineering, work in the technical aspect. So I know that some people learn in different ways. So I'm more a visual learner. I like to look at pictures to understand concepts, etc. I've got people that love listening to audio. So like audiobooks, that's how they best learn. Or there are people that love technical spec sheets and specifications, and they really like to get down to the detail. When you were first coming into that world and you were learning, how were you best learning, and what tips would you give to somebody that's kind of, this is a new world for them as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I learned from reading really well. I like learning from reading because it's at your own pace. I guess that's visuals as well. So I read a ton and I memorized things. I'm a memorizer. And I think memorization, it gets a lot of bad press in sales and other things, but really memorization is just the basis for for understanding. And especially in sales, there's a lot of regurgitation that has to happen. So up front, regurgitating's fine, and you'll understand things better after you're able to regurgitate. But yeah, I just, like you said about the acronyms, that's just an example. We had a list of Zuora of 200 acronyms, and I just read them all 100 times. I wanted to understand them, And when I started at Zuora, I was selling a revenue recognition automation product, which is as dry as it sounds. And it's basically like an accounting automation product. And I mean, for that, actually, the visuals were very powerful. Because something that's very interesting about technology that is an aspect of it that I really like is the architecture, especially in the SaaS world. And you brought up APIs, there's all these different things, but you're connecting systems and there's a flow of information, and your product fits into this flow of information in a certain way. And the ability to understand what ecosystem you're playing in and how your technology fits into that ecosystem is very vital. So there's a lot of visuals around that were really helpful. And at Zuora, we were always whiteboarding and drawing things out and trying to understand what process we were fitting into. At Zuora, that's the order to cash process. OTC, giving you another acronym, but the visuals were very helpful for that. So I think for me, it was layering reading memorization on top of visuals and understanding where all these acronyms and all this information to the sort of visual architecture. And that, I think memorizing it up front and then kind of over time, bolstering like my background knowledge was a good way to sort of short circuit, sounding like you at least knew what you were talking about, which is like 75%.
I love it. And it was the same thing, dude. Like I remember when I first started out at Zuora, like we had like something called the command of the message, kind of like what is the message we're trying to give out to the industry. We're speaking to the 5 guys or girls in the room. We're trying to understand their world. And I'd always, to your point, memorize, get pitch perfect. But half the time I could always hear myself when I was on a call, like a discovery call or an intro call, like, what am I actually talking about? And what does this mean? And it's really funny because I'd always record, like if I did a first call, like we did use Zoom back then as well. And I've actually still got some of the original files of me as an SDR pitching the RBM model, like the whole revenue recognition and the whole subscription economy. And I watch it back now and I get it. I'm like, so now I know what I'm talking about. But I think a really good test that I used to have was I'd pitch it to friends and family to see if they understood it. And half the time they're like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And a really good thing I realized was to dumb things down, because I lived in that world and I had the curse of knowledge that I knew everything about this world. But when I'm speaking to maybe a CFO for the first time, they may understand revenue recognition. They may understand ARR, but new cool things that Zuora was doing, they didn't understand. So I had to kind of dumb it down a bit. And that helped me learn. But then it helped me choose, okay, do I speak really techie to the CTO, or do I talk really about product and monetization to the CMO? But as a young SDR, this was something cool to test and try out. And the best place that I learned was the new SDRs that came in. Like I was just one SDR in Europe, and then it grew to like 10, 15 people. And I saw new guys coming in, and I'd always love to connect with the US. And I understood as Zuora grew, the culture was changing. People were changing. More experienced people such as yourself are coming into the business. So I left back in, when was it, 2015? And I saw Zuora grow. But as an SDR, living in like that product suite, living in like the office, meeting with the guys, how did you find it as a culture thing, like learning from each other? Like what were your best practices working as a team, Max?
Yeah, you brought up a lot of great points in there. And on the concept of working as a team, I mean, it's everything as an SDR. And that's not just for the flow of knowledge. It's also for morale. It's also for career development. So there's a lot of reasons that it's just essential to do everything as a team and to share knowledge. I mean, you got to look at what you're doing as a company goal and to bring the company forward. Because if you're invested in the company, you have shares, you want to be promoted, you want to be able to sell the product in the next role you're in. It's all about making sure that everyone's successful as possible. And I'm not going to say that was always my goal, because I'm extremely competitive and was mostly, interested in my own success. But
yeah,
the biggest thing is that as an SDR, you're frontline and you are basically battering your message against people who don't want to hear it day in and day out. And in that process, it's like a sharpening process. And you're constantly taking this message and throwing it outbound at people and seeing what hits. And if you have one person doing that, it's not as good as 5 people doing that. It's not as good as 10 people doing that. It's not as good as 20 people doing that. So if you're able to take the lessons that everyone is learning from their messaging, from their strategies, and really just aggregate it and figure out what the best combination of those messages and those processes is, like that's how you're going to be most successful as a team. And that's something we were really good at Zuora. And it doesn't happen naturally. It takes systems and processes that bring people together and force that knowledge share. And force people to, bring their information together to get the best possible process. And it's not always automatic. So that's what management is for. And that's what putting in automated things or things that happen on a weekly basis that allow people to share information is what allowed us to really bring things forward. But beyond that, from the morale perspective, like it's a hard job. I think it's the hardest job on earth. I've been doing it for 2 years. I'm exhausted. But having like a crew of people who are all doing it, it's like, it's like playing a hard sport where it's very, where it requires a lot of conditioning or it's very physical. Like you get really tight with your team, and the same is with SDRing, and it allows you to come back every day and hit it hard. And there's a good sense of team competition, coupled with team support. And that was all huge for me and allowed me to really enjoy my time as an SDR.
And just by hearing you, Max, like you can hear that experience of that conditioning, that life that you learned as an SDR at Zuora. And you raised a couple of good points there as well. Like, this is a tough job. And a lot of the time I would have to try to convince other people, like other AEs and companies I've gone off to, saying like, your guys, like you said, are the front line. They're the ones that are pitching this message. They're trying to convince people that don't want to listen to them to, I know, have some time, look at a new solution, look at a new way of doing something like business. And we're serving this to you on a plate, Mr. A or Mrs. AE, and saying, please talk to them. And they're like, is it really qualified? Does it have like everything that we need in order for it to, does the deal have legs? And again, like trying to do this day in, day out, it can burn you out. Like I've gone through experiences of feeling that burnout. But to your point, if you have a team that are doing it together, it's nice to have that healthy competition. You know, like I want to hit my target. I want to be top SDR or ZBR at Zuora. And at one point I was globally, but that title was taken very quickly by others that were coming through the ranks. But I enjoyed watching people like, you know, get to President's Club or, you know, taking that title. I remember one guy, Neve, he came in completely brand new, didn't know who the hell this guy was, and he was just smashing. And all I wanted to do is like sit down with the dude like remotely and say, tell me your secret sauce. And they're happy to give that information. That's why I loved at Zuora. But for you, where you're saying it's tough, it's tiring, like how do you keep motivated and how do you keep persistent? Like what's the thing that gets you up in the morning think, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to take this today?
That's a great question. And it's an answer that changes depending on the day and the week and the month and the quarter. At this point in my career, the biggest thing is that, you know, I'm working towards a promotion and I have a clear understanding of what I need to do to get that promotion. So that gets me out of bed every day, and I want that promotion more than I've wanted anything. And it's something I've wanted for a long time. So that in itself is like a very tangible thing that keeps me pumping every day. Beyond that, I would say like, let me like boil it down to three things. So there's the promotion. That's like the obvious, concrete, tangible thing that I'm working towards. Number two is I'm super competitive, like just in general. Like there's only one SDR at Productive besides me, and there was like 50 at Zuora. I wanted to be number one. I wanted to be number one at Zuora. I left as the number one new business SDR at Zuora. I don't know if I could have had it way. I was going, like checking those numbers every single day. And not just, it's not about, you know, beating the people around you, but it's because I hold myself to a high standard and, you know, coming from a background of athletics, like there's a lot of reasons, but I'm extremely competitive, and that is always something that will drive me. And then a third thing being, and this is more true every day as I do this job for longer and longer and get more confident in my abilities, is that I think I'm one of the best in my craft. You know, I'm a top 1%, top 5%, whatever it may be, SDR. And I have to go prove that every day. And the great thing about sales and the great thing about SDRing in general, like once again with the sports analogies, is when you're in these scenarios, you're on these cold calls, you're in these qualifying conversations, like this isn't something scripted. This isn't something that that you can like just apply some sort of methodology to. Like it's game time, you know, and it's instinct, and it's something that's really exciting. And that's something I enjoy about sales and the SDR role in general. But it keeps me going to put myself in those situations and show that I can still do it. You know, if I was crushing on the phone 6 months ago and then today I can't do it, like that means I've digressed in my skills. And I would never want to allow that to happen. So that's another thing that keeps me you know, internal competition and internally proving to myself that I can get up and do it every day and not be a pansy.
I love your passion, your drive, and the fact that you say that you hold yourself to a high standard, you know, and I can understand in terms of like an athletic approach, it's that consistency. It's because if you're doing it then and you're successful, the moment you become complacent and comfortable, that's when everything can fall apart, right? And like you said, you're crushing stuff. You have to prove it every day. I remember a very scary point at my SDR journey at Zuora where I had Richard Terry Lloyd. He flew over to our London office because he wanted to meet this guy called Neil Buyan, who's the new EMEA SDR. And he said to me, I don't think you're right for the job. And I was like, dude, you don't even know me, you know? And I remember for 2 days straight in this London office, this small little box office, RTO was literally sitting to the right of me, listening to me cold call and following up Zuora leads.
That's terrifying.
And it was, and I just thought, this guy's going to eat me. Like, what am I going to do? And I was doing calls and I was nervous and I had my script next to me. And a true story, at the end of that day, he looked at me and he said, Neil, I'm going to be straight up. I don't think you've got what it takes, and I don't think you're going to be here very long. I just want to be honest with you. And I went home so disheartened and so like, what do I have to do? And I remember waking up the next morning and I ironed a shirt and it was bright pink, and I wore a really smart tie, and I came in and I had my script and RTL sitting there, and I'm going to show this man what I'm made of. And I went into my first call, screwed it up completely, and he just looked at me with disdain. Then I got onto the second call. He said, come on, let's go again. And then I went into the second call, and halfway through, I just looked at the script and I threw the paper to the side.
There you go.
And I just went into this Zuora pitch. And at the end of the day, I booked 9 sales qualified opportunities. And RTL turned me around and said, Neil, or Pink, I'm going to call you now. I just needed to put that fire under you because I knew you had what it takes, but I wanted you to believe it. And that was the best experience I ever had. And why you said it's not all about being scripted, I 100% agree with that. And I also say to other SDRs, have the script to learn the plays, but don't rely on the paper, you know. But also, as you mentioned, with athleticism, like you have an athletic background, what techniques or mindset have you been able to take from that into your sales career, and how has it helped you?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Before I answer that, I thought it was funny that RTL negative reversaled you through that. That's how you know he's an A1 salesperson. He's literally using like just the best sales techniques on his SDRs internally. So that guy knows what's good. But I mean, from athletics, it's really just it's the perseverance. It's the getting up and going to work every single day, and accepting the fact that it's going to be hard, and that doesn't mean that you got to stop. And just knowing, like, I guess, delayed gratification. You know, the sports I played, like, I'm not going to say that I enjoyed practice every single day and I was, sweating my ass off and, super exhausted and getting home wiped out. But then you win a game or you win a match or whatever it is, and all that hard work was worth it. And I think it's just that's sort of a built-in concept that sports gives you, that is always going to allow you to push as an SDR. So yeah, it's pretty simple. It's getting up every day and breaking rocks.
I love it. And as you said, like, you want to move on into like an account exec role, you want to get into closing and stuff. What's your game plan? Because there's probably people that are still in this position and they're contemplating that promotion. What advice would you give them to kind of set up a game plan to work towards that promotion, Max?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Yeah. So I think, for one, and this seems obvious, but really it's not, because I've seen people not leverage this, but make it obvious, clear, and continuously clear what you want throughout the entire process. And make sure that every time there's a conversation that has anything to do with your future or anything to do with what you've been doing or any successes, tie that to the future role that you want. And try to create some sort of, what you'd call it in sales would be like a joint execution plan, but sort of expectations around, here's how I'm going to execute, and here's my expectations of how the business is going to compensate me or what the return is going to be based on that execution. And for me, that's a promotion. And for me, everyone at my company, I guarantee you, knows that I want a promotion. And everything I do that's positive, I somehow loop back into the fact that I want that promotion. And I'm always pushing the timeline. And I mean, that's something that is just generally in sales you're going to have to do. You're going to have to create compelling events and a timeline so you can get your deal over the line. And all a promotion is an internal deal with whoever your stakeholders are. They're going to promote you. And just like any sell in life, create expectations, fulfill expectations, and ensure that there is some sort of structure around, once these expectations are fulfilled, that I get what I want. And for me, that's a promotion. But none of that matters if you're not crushing it, if people can't feel your energy and feel your desire. So it's, once again, that's an every single day process.
I love it. I love the way that you say a promotion is like an internal deal and you're running a sales process on it. You're setting your timelines, you're setting your objectives, and you're doing your activities to ensure that you're getting there. That's solid advice. I'm going to challenge, and I want to ask a really hard question that I've done with a lot of other SDRs, and I'm thinking more like a VP of sales or as an AE. I'd always ask myself the question, so here's the deal that I want to close, and I always think there's 1 in 3 that will only ever close. I always have to think of a backup plan of what if it doesn't go the way I want. So I wanted to be the AE. It took me a while to get to there because I had a lot of things to learn, but I had to think of backup plans. So if it was maybe moving into management, or perhaps maybe moving into a senior role as an SDR, for you, if hopefully it will happen, and I do believe it will happen for you, but what would be your backup plan to if that doesn't work out?
Yeah, I've already confronted this situation that, like, before at Zuora. I was 100% sure that I was going to be promoted to either an account executive or an account manager at Zuora. I think I had all the accolades to be the person that was next in line. And right at the last minute, when I was nearing the end of my rope as an SDR mentally at Zuora, they cut the commercial sales team, they cut the account management team, and in what may have been a shrewd move for the company, but what for me was a death sentence to where I wanted to go at Zuora. And that day, I started looking for new jobs and ended up at Productive. So at that point, like I confronted the question that you're bringing up, and the answer was either A, go be an account executive. Because actually, and this makes me need to bring up another thing. I told all the SDRs at Zuora that I was kind of, that I was one of the most seasoned ones of. I said, never be an SDR again. Either you become an account executive at Zuora, or you go be an account executive somewhere else. But I never want to see you guys have SDR on your resume twice. Like that's indicative of a lack of dedication or lack of skill or something like that. Here I am sitting in front of you with SDR on my resume twice. So I didn't listen to my own advice, but my opportunity, my choice then at Zuora was either A, go be an account executive. I had account executive offers for way more money than I'm making now at companies where I potentially didn't believe in the leadership or weren't selling that complex of a product. Because when it comes down to it, if you're going to bring in an SDR from another company and allow them to be an AE right off the bat at your company, your hiring standards are probably lower than other companies that aren't going to allow that. The company that I'm at now, Productive, is an SDR. I didn't get the title I wanted. I'm getting paid less, but I really believed in the leadership. I believed in the product. And I believed that the reason they weren't going to give me an AE role right off the bat is because they demanded a certain level of excellence. And looking at my colleagues at Productive compared to some of the account executive colleagues I would have had at other companies, the pedigree and the skill, it just at one glance at their LinkedIn is extremely clear. So in that situation, I did decide to go be an SDR again because I knew the opportunity that I was setting myself up for. And I, once again, delayed the gratification of maybe taking a closing role earlier. It's a tough decision. You think about it every day. This time around, if that became a conversation again, in that instance, I think it would be a matter of going to find an account executive role and leveraging my current experience. I feel like I've been not manipulated is not the right word, but I've delayed things for a long time. And now I have like a pretty large, large amount of skill in this that I don't want to parlay into another SDR role ever again. So roundabout answer, but there you go. Something I think.
No. Yeah, I think that you've given the right answer. So you've admitted the being humble about, I said that you don't ever do this twice, but then you've kind of felt that experience. So it humbles you a little bit and it helps you reflect as to, okay, what does it take? What do I need to do? And I love the way that you're saying, because I see this happen a lot of the times, like SDRs get promoted to the AE without being given that coaching, that experience of, negotiation, closing, dealing with procurement, all the things that get nitty gritty into closing sales. And if they give the opportunity to, learn some stuff about this company before you move into that role, I think that's a great thing to do. Like with me, same thing happened at Zuora. I really wanted to be an AE, but they said, Neil, you're really good in management. We don't want to lose the leadership. And there are some things that you need to learn. But I was a bit stubborn. I said, no, I know everything. I know the product. I can do a demo. I can do whatever. I couldn't. I realized later on. So then when I moved to my next company, they said, well, you need to prove yourself first, be an SDR for a couple of months. If you can bring in some successes, we'll then talk about the promotion.
We'll fast track you to the AE role. That's their favorite phrase.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you've thought about it, you're preparing yourself. And I always think a really good way that I prepared myself thereafter was I'd always look at a job spec for the role that I want. And I'd look at all the responsibilities and key things I need to do. And I'd ask myself, what can I not do today? And if I'm still going to be the SDR, I'm going to go find a person in that company that can do that really good. I'm going to sit with them and I'm going to learn from them so that when it comes to that time promotion, I'm ready and raring to go and I can prove myself as well. But I fully believe that when that opportunity comes up for you, Max, it's going to happen. And I think we're going to have to get you back as a guest to see kind of like what happened with Max next, But as we're kind of coming to the end of this show, and it's been a great, super energized conversation, I think, to say the least. If you were to give 3 golden nuggets of advice to a young Max who's just about to embark on this journey, what would you give? What would you say to the Max?
Yeah, great question, Neil. And actually, I never prepare things, but I looked at your preparation document last night and actually wrote some things out for this. So
Far away, my man.
Yeah, actually, I have the 3 nuggets, and I have the 3 worst bits of advice, which was also
Ooh,
cheat. So I almost love bad
bring it.
better than good advice, honestly. So, but yeah, so my 3 best bits of advice. The first one is allow yourself to be a robot. So, what does this mean? This means creating repeatable systems and processes that are operating in the background so that your time is spent in ways where you don't have to think about it, where your energy is spent on your interactions with potential prospects, but you don't need to be constantly strategizing around your systems or your messaging because you've created things in the background that allow you to be very systematic and robotic with these processes. We used to always at Zuora use the term breaking rocks for being an SDR because when it comes down to it, the best SDRs are really good at breaking rocks. So they do it the same way every time and they do it all day. So some examples of that, you brought up your script you were using initially when you were cold calling at Zuora. I don't like scripts, but I do like things like cold call structure. So I suggest that everyone, here's one of my shout outs. I suggest everyone take a look at John Barrows. I went to a John Barrows training that they sent me to. It was actually really expensive. It was a great opportunity. They sent me to at Zuora. And he gave this cold call, not script, but structure, where it basically goes like persona, common challenge, our solution, where we've done it before. So that's something that it's not a script. There's no like verbiage in there around the product, but it allows you to go to anyone's LinkedIn and not really think about it and have a cold call structure ready for them right off the bat. That allows you to make that extremely repeatable and you're still customizing things to people. So that's one example. Another example being, using tools like Outreach and SalesLoft and having sequences that are super built out and just require you to put the same level of light customization into that email every single time. Allows you to be robotic, go to the same place on everyone's LinkedIn and really just plug something in and break rocks, get on the phones and spend your time, rather than analysis paralysis is the word everyone likes, but rather than doing that, getting out to as many people as possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing, the hardest thing, maintain your confidence. And part of this is faking it till you make it. I think, you'll notice in SDRing, there's always times when you're booking like 10 cold call meetings in a day, you're having a great week, having a great quarter. And then there's weeks and months where you're getting no cold call meetings or, you're not having to get a follow up, whatever it might be. And I found that a ton of this is that your confidence ebbs and flows and swings. And when you're in a state of confidence, you sound better on the phones. You feel more comfortable writing, personalized emails to people. You feel more comfortable maybe bothering people, maybe hitting them twice in 4 days if it's necessary. If you lack your confidence, you're not going to do those things. You're going to stutter on the phone. You're going to sound like a cold caller who doesn't belong in the room. So any way you can, and the fact is, like I said, you're going to have to fake it a lot of the time. It doesn't come naturally, but fake that confidence and it will, you fake it, you put a smile on your face, you look at someone's picture on LinkedIn while you're calling them and you act like you're having a conversation with them. And it's going to allow you to propel your career and propel your prospecting process forward. The last thing is, and this is something actually my cousin that I originally worked with in real estate when I was 18, this was his phrase is the fortune is in the follow-up. Prospecting, you're out there with a spear gun trying to hunt sharks all day. And usually on the first shot, you're going to like draw a little bit of blood, but then you're still gonna have to go, get the net and catch them in the water. And that's really the process that gives you your money. People typically aren't going to book a meeting on the first cold call. They're typically not going to respond to the first email with some times for a meeting. You're probably have to hit that person 10 times to get the meeting. And that is much more important than any of the first steps of outbounding or the broad blasts or whatever it is. You see someone that's engaging, you talk to someone, you even have someone hear your voice and say, now is not a good time. You need to follow up with those people until you either gotten a yes or a no, because that's really where the money and where the meetings come from. So that's my 3 pieces of good advice that I wish I would have had that I took, 2 years ago.
Jeez, that is solid strategic advice and definitely a big shout out to John as well. But Max, man, whoa, that is a lot of good information. And guys, if you're listening, if you want to replay that back and listen to it again and again and again and again and repeat it and memorize it, please do. And the interesting bit, you're flipping the script here. 3 bad bits of advice you like to know about the bad bits of advice. Please tell me more.
So the first one, I think, I've mentioned cold calls enough in this call for this to be obvious, but people think cold calls are out of style. They don't work anymore. It's a waste of your time, like email and LinkedIn. I'll be the first one to say that's total BS. I think that and you know what, let everyone else think that. Let the whole industry think cold calls are out of style so you can get on the phone, call people's cell phones and get in front of people and have personal conversations. They're never going to go out of style until personal interaction goes out of style. And regardless of how this year's gone, it's not going anywhere. So cold calls are not out of style. That's the first BS piece of advice that I've gotten. The second thing, and I think this is something that I've heard from everyone in sales, down from account executives to SDRs, but don't waste your time understanding the product. People are like, oh, don't understand the product, understand the sales process, understand the psychology of sales. I totally disagree with that. You're typically going to be selling products to people who are way more experienced and way more comfortable in the industry that you're selling to than you are. And if you go in unprepared to have any second layer, third layer conversation, you're not going to be able to level with these people and have a conversation that's meaningful to them. And these people are looking for meaningful interactions from salespeople. I think about a cold call I was on yesterday for 12 minutes with a VP of IT at a 4,000 person company. If I didn't have a knowledge of my product and a knowledge of the space, there's no way I would have held that guy's attention, and no way we could have gone down all the different lines of conversation that are necessary to, build ethos with someone of that level of skill and at that level in a company. So I think you got to understand the products, spend the time, understand the products that are vital to your outbound sales process, or the parts of the product that are vital to that. The last thing is you can strategize your way out of hard work. Not going to belabor this, but the best SDRs make calls and email all day, and you can't automate or do anything to get around that. And I guarantee you look across any company at the top performing SDRs, and they're busting their asses. So that it is a hard job, but there's a lot of honor in that as well.
Whew, that was a lot of hot information. The vision that just came in my head whilst you're spitting these hot bars, you're like a Rick Ross of SDRing, dude. I've got a lot of yeah, you are the boss on this. I agree, dude. I thank you so much for all the knowledge, the information, and I will be watching you with a close eye, Max, because I'm waiting for that promotion as well, dude. And I know that things will work out the best way as long as you keep that consistency, as long as you keep this mentality and hit them hard, man. And before we end, do you have any shout outs or any announcements you want to make?
Yeah, shout out to you, Neil. This was really fun. This is actually, I've been on other podcasts, but this is the first professional podcast I've been on. Ton of fun. You're a host. I'll be following Happy Selling as well. Hopefully at some point in the future, I can, bring you guys in to train some SDRs or whatever it is that, the best thing is for you guys, because this is a ton of fun. I think you have a lot to share. Shout out wise, I'll give a shout out to Tyler Wallace, who was my first and last SDR manager at Zuora. Really was a great introduction to SDR. He made it fun, respected hard work. Zach Malillo, you should bring him on the podcast as well. I'll shoot you his LinkedIn. He's now a sales development manager at a really exciting startup, but was also a colleague of mine at Zuora, who I sat in the trenches with every day, and we made it really fun for each other. We talked a lot of smack, that kind of stuff's necessary, and we kept each other competitive. So definitely shouts out to Zach and Tyler. I definitely suggest you reach out to both of them. They have some great things to share as well.
I think just for the guys at home, I do have a sound engineer. Carl, if you're listening, can you drop some bombs like sound effects on this? Because that was just hot. I loved it. But look, Max, I'm going to make sure I'm going to put in our show notes, like contact if people want to reach out to you to ask advice. What is the best channel for you? Some people it's Twitter, it's LinkedIn, it's other different mediums. What's the best way to get in touch with Maxmillian Licht?
It's not Twitter, I'll tell you that. LinkedIn for sure. Yeah, everyone, please follow me on LinkedIn, or friend request me, whatever it is. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I love speaking to other salespeople and other SDRs. So would love to connect with anyone.
Thank you so much, my man. So guys, this was Maxmillian Licht, SDR for the time being at Productive, and we're going to be watching him closely. But thank you for being a guest on the SDR DiscoCall podcast. We'd love to have you back as a future guest. But most importantly, Max, good luck and happy selling, my man.
Happy selling to you as well, Neil. Thanks so much.